So my background, I did not start as a frontliner like many people in CX did. I started in finance, so what I bring to the table is just different. So leverage your experiences more than your credentials. Why do you do what you do?
Before we start the show, I have a quick question for you. Is your resume stuck in the rejection pile? At Resume Assassin, I create powerful resumes that showcase your skills, experience, and achievements, getting you noticed by recruiters. I'll also optimize your LinkedIn profile, transforming it into a magnet for opportunity. Visit resumeassassin.com today and take charge of your job search. Visit resumeassassin.com.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. I've worked in one other country before. Okay, so I volunteered at a children's hospital in Nicaragua, and that was several years ago, but it was an absolutely amazing experience. And since then, I've had a ton of people ask me how they can be more competitive in a global job market. And I think that searching for a job in a new country isn't just, about translating your resume or your experience, really. It's more about understanding how to position yourself in a completely different market. So today we're exploring what it really takes to go global with your job search, and Camila is here to help us break it all down.
Sure.
Yeah, well, awesome. So before we actually dive into the topic, there's one question that I ask all of my guests. I'm kind of throwing this one on you, so bear with me.
Just ask me 1 second, because I have a cat here at home that wants to be part of this podcast.
Well, bring him in. I love it. There we go. Hey, buddy. My dog's usually pounding on the door, trying to get in.
Exactly this. Let me show you.
Hey, buddy, you're adorable. Oh my goodness. I had a big white cat growing up.
He has been following me.
My goodness. I had a big fat white cat named Snowball growing up. So in 10 words or less, what's the best piece of advice that someone has ever given you?
Be my true self. And it took me a lot of time to understand this. And not only understand, but to start being my true self. I'm pretty sure that the environment shapes us, right? And over time, we start being a lot less of our true self and what others expect from us. And this, to me, has been the biggest mistake I believe people make, and the best advice that I have received.
Oof, that's good. What a way to start.
Oh my goodness, on fire.
Yes, all right, we're done. So Camila, let's start with your story. What's your background and what kind of sparked your passion for helping people build global careers?
Yes. How many hours do we have?
As many as you want. Let's go. All day.
Okay. I am originally from Brazil, and I will kind of try to summarize my story, but it's important to know that I am a single child of a single mom. I came from a very low income family in Brazil. I was born and raised in São Paulo. I graduated in economics. For the first 10 years of my life, I was the finance girl until I decided to transition into operations, mostly focus on client experience. All that transition happened at the same time that I took my master, and I kicked off my international career. So I have left Brazil 10 years ago, and since then I have lived in 5 countries. At the same time, I got married, I grew the family, I adopted a cat.
Yes, the most important part.
Speaking of background, I would say finance for sure. I still leverage my financial background, but throughout my professional life, I developed a good sense of equity and diversity, and I applied all of this into customer experience, which has a lot to do with employee experience as well.
Yeah. So you've worked in 5 countries.
Did, yes.
What 5 countries?
So I started my international journey in Colombia.
Okay.
So I lived in Bogota for a little over a year. Then I went south. I had an experience in Chile. That's where I met my husband, by the way. And both of us are Brazilian, but we met in
Oh my
Chile.
gosh, crazy.
Yes. And then after Chile, I had an experience in Europe. I lived in Dublin for almost 2 years. After Dublin, I moved to Chicago. That's where my kid was born. So my first season in the US was actually in Chicago, but too cold for my Brazilian standards.
I believe it.
Right. After that, I lived for almost 3 years in Mexico, Mexico City. And then we relocated back to the US and we planted our seeds here in Miami. That's where I live right now. And I don't have any plans of leaving Miami anytime soon.
Wow. So you've lived and worked in multiple countries. How do you think that's shaped the way you think about your career growth and the opportunities that are out there?
Totally. So I am a completely different person. And for me to explain this, I need to get back to my decision of career shift. After 10 years in finance, I realized that finance was kind of limiting myself. I want to explore something different. And while working in finance, I always used to partner with different departments to take my financial backgrounds to different projects. And then I started that career transition with a short experience in a short assignment in marketing, which was great. It gave me a different perspective. And at the same time, I started my MBA, which was an executive version of MBA. By the way, the best thing I did. So speaking of MBAs and what to do, I think the executive MBA gave me what I was looking for, which is a good balance between theory and real life. And because things in my life, they happen all at once, I transitioned my career. I started my MBA and I got an offer to kick off my international career as well. Everything kind of in 12-month period. That's how it happens. Exactly.
Wow.
And differently than what I originally thought, that it would be my international assignment, my first international assignment would either be Europe or the US because of the past companies that I have worked for. It was actually Colombia. And I knew Colombia back then, 10 years ago. The news we used to get from Colombia were not the most positive news. They were still dealing with drug trafficking.
Yeah.
Again, the country was reopening to tourism, right? It's completely different than nowadays, for example. But I knew Colombia based on my previous business trips. And since my first visit to Colombia, I like it very much. And I said, you know what? It's a no-brainer. I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted an international career. And I said, you know what? I'm not entirely sure. The opportunity that I have right now is Colombia. And I do not know if Europe or the US will ever knock my door. So why not?
Yeah.
And Mary, I can tell you, it was one of the most challenging moments of my life.
Really?
For different reasons. One, I moved by myself. I was not dating or married. No, it was a single. So
Yeah.
it was me moving to Colombia to explore the unknown. Second, I went to Colombia as the country manager for an international organization. And it's a very male-driven society in Colombia. At least it was 10 years ago, not sure about right now. Imagine a woman moving internationally to take the leadership of a company. There were other people already working for that organization and looking for that position. So it was not the warmest welcome that I could have had.
That would be so difficult.
Very difficult. And not because of me, but because of what I represented. And that's what took me some time to understand. So I faced many challenges. One, because my expectations were completely different than what I was actually experiencing in real life. I knew Colombia from my business trips. I knew kind of the culture, but as a tourist, right? For a 1 week visit, not for living. And having to deal with this male-oriented society that was more extreme than what I was used to, even though Brazil is also kind of a male-driven. I am originally from São Paulo, and Colombia was a little bit further in terms of a male-dominated society.
Yeah. And in what ways did you experience that?
I couldn't say my position, for example. Whenever I said my position, people would go away from me because culturally speaking, the women in Colombia, at least 10 years ago, they were still in that moment where women were staying at home to raise the family, not working abroad, not working out of home, even less internationally. And imagine, I was not married. So what kind of a woman are you, right? So I was not a mother And I was exploring my international career. So I was someone completely aside from their regular or common standards.
Right. Wow.
Not to mention that there were people working for this particular organization that were looking after this role. And they were right. So they have developed their careers with the organization. They have invested in developing themselves. And why all of a sudden a woman that was not even part of the company? Because I was hired in Brazil directly to be the country manager of this organization in Colombia. So I was not working for that company in Brazil before moving to Colombia. So who is she?
Right. So I would imagine nobody listened to you at first. Did you ever figure out how to kind of assimilate into more of a male-dominated culture?
Yes, and I was so happy because that's I think what frustrated me the most. I was in the peak of my career. I was so excited to kick off my international career, to live abroad. I already had a kind of a close relationship to Colombia. That's why to me it was a no-brainer. But once I got there as a permanent resident, things have presented to me in a completely different way. And I did not have the support from the local employees because they didn't know who I was.
Yeah, right.
Even less why I was the chosen one. Even though I had the support from my manager who hired me, he was based in Brazil. And I was the one having to deal with all of those differences. And at some point in time, a few months after moving to Colombia, I got an offer to get back to Brazil.
Okay.
And a good offer.
Okay.
And I can tell you, Mary, it was like 3 seconds for me to get back. It was like, what am I doing here? So I cannot connect with Colombians. Yeah. I cannot make friends. I'm always by myself. My support system is still in Brazil. And they live a completely different life than the life that I'm living. So why am I staying here? And then in those 3 seconds, I realized because I really want to kind of develop my international career. And if I really want to keep living under my Brazilian standards, I wouldn't have left. So those are the things that will actually shape my career. And then I started kind of disconnecting the prejudice that I was taking personal from me. Because it was not with me, Camila. It was with what I used to represent. Yeah. So I stopped saying my job title. I started engaging people on a more personal side. Say, hey, what do you do? I work for this company. What do you do? That I do sales. Right? So, and I started engaging and living the Colombian life on their lifestyle and not trying to take Brazil along with me, because this is one of the mistakes people make once they live abroad. The first thing they do is they look for their home country community. They only speak their language. They do not allow themselves to get to know the culture. And it makes the international experience way harder than it actually is, because it's not easy. Right? So for people that are born and raised in one particular country, all of a sudden you have to understand a new language. You have to listen what is not said. You have to read what's not written. And you have to feel what is not expressed. Yeah. And those are the things that you learn in your home country culture.
So how do you do that? You know,
language is stuff.
Yeah, you know, and I think I speak with a lot of people that they're dying to leave the United States and go abroad and work. And I think that a lot of people don't think about these things, Camila. You know, they don't think about what will it actually be like when I get there? How will my life completely change? How will the culture be completely different? Because a lot of those people are just basing it on kind of like what you did with Colombia, where it's like, hey, I visited Colombia. I like Colombia. It's going to be great. I know these things about it. But as a visitor, it's much different than it is when you're actually living there. So for people who are like, I really want to go abroad and work, what are some ways that they can start uncovering some of those hidden aspects of the culture that they maybe didn't see when they were visiting that country?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would do is to start engaging with, in my case, right, with Brazilians living abroad, but living the culture. Because remember what I said, one of the big mistakes I see people making is connecting with the community and living in that particular community. So what are the learnings that these people have learned? What are the lessons, right, that they have learned? This is a good way, visiting the place. So once I moved to Colombia, I knew Bogota. But for example, once we moved to Chicago, which was the third international assignment, my husband got his visa denied, his tourist visa denied. And I got an offer to move to Chicago, and I told him, I know the city, we knew the culture, I think we're good to go based on my previous experience, but I really wanted him to see and experience the city before making a decision, and he couldn't. Thankfully, Chicago was a kind of a good opportunity, and it's such a nice city.
Yeah.
But what if not? Right? So I wouldn't move internationally without having visited the place, without having spoken and talked to people living in there, and not only people from your home country, but expats in general. Talk to people of similar cultures. For example, once we moved to Mexico, that's exactly what we did. We went to visit Mexico City. We've had a chance to talk to not only Brazilians living there for a while, but also with other expats for them to let us know what are the ups and downs, what are the things that they faced. So at least you get better prepared to face those things.
Yeah.
Because the only thing I know is that you're going to face a lot more than what people tell you.
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, and I'm curious, just to back up a little bit, because a lot of the people that I talk to are not nearly as far along in their global career as you are. And, some of them aren't in an MBA program and they're not getting placed into these rotations, but they're dying to leave the United States and find a job somewhere else. So from your perspective and your experience, what are some ways that they can position their background, whether it's on their resume, their LinkedIn profile, their networking strategy, to even start winning interviews in other countries outside of the United States?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I help many people doing this, mostly Brazilians. And the first thing is to understand what is the job market dynamic. And I'm going to speak of the difference between Brazil and the US, for example.
Yeah.
In Brazil, we used to leverage our credentials. In the past, kind of for your family, no longer the case, but which college have you attended? Which company have you worked for? And those labels kind of speak louder than your experience. The fact that you have worked for those companies or you have attended those colleges gives you a credential to qualify for better job opportunities. That's not the case here in the US. And especially once you come from a different country. So even if I had attended the best college in Brazil, how does it compare with the colleges here in the US?
Mm-hmm.
And US job market is more of the value that you bring to the table. So speaking of mistakes people make, one is, depending if you are kind of being transferred, but if you come here and look for a job from scratch, people tend to leave their career back to their home country. And I'm like, why? So your experience is your asset. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is you have to kind of shape it and communicate it aligns to your audience. It's like when you're going to give a speech. So if I'm talking to kids, to children, I have to align to this audience. If I'm talking to C-level, it's not going to be the same thing. But the example I always give is, imagine your, vacation trip. If you're going to share this with your friends, it's one tone, it's one way. If you're going to share this as an example of where to go to the people at the company you work for, it's different. But at the end of the day, it's the same vacation trip. But you need to adjust to your audience. So people do not understand. They try to come with and bring along with them the job market dynamic of their home country. And this is not going to work here. That's why I see many Brazilians and other expats, other immigrants applying for jobs for such a long time. And in the first or second interview, they drop off.
Yeah.
Because they do not speak their language.
We get to know that job market dynamic, like if we've got somebody in Chicago that wants to go work in Europe, how do we figure out, okay, what is the job market dynamic in Europe so that I can have a successful search there or anywhere else, really?
The same thing, the same thing I said before, like connecting with people that have, connecting with immigrants that have been there for at least a few years, so they do know what is the difference. Because if we speak with, let's suppose we are talking about France, if we speak with French people, they will not know what is the difference of how you present yourself in the US and how you have to present yourself in France. They're going to explain to you how to do in France, but what you need is kind of this translation. Right? Yeah. So in the example I gave of Brazilians, the college that you attend or the company that you worked for will have a less weight here in the US. But then what I ask is, tell me, why have you decided to attend this college? Why have you chosen this subject? What have you done once you were attending classes? Have you worked in any volunteer type of work? Why have you chosen this first company to work for? Because those are the things that are normally fully attached, associated with your authenticity, with your true self. And that's your biggest asset. So once you have this, okay, and then what do you want to do? Because the other thing is sometimes people come here and say, oh, I want to be a salesperson. But why? Just because some friends told me it would be easier. Okay, but you don't have the skill set. So most likely you're not going to be so successful when applying for those kind of jobs. What are your experiences? What do you really like to do? What kind of brings you joy? I tell my mentees, say, what would you do even for free? That's exactly what we are going to use to position you in the job market.
So what's something that's worked for you that might surprise people that are looking for some of these international roles?
That's a tough question. I think I've been learning on the way. Let me think what has worked. I think kind of understanding the culture of the companies. Sometimes, again, it all depends on every individual's situation, but understanding the culture of the company is something that is very valuable for your long-term success. People get anxious of getting a job, and 2 or 3 months in, they realize that the company culture has nothing to do with their values, and it becomes a nightmare. So this is one of the things that I highly encourage people to do some research to better understand. And moreover, when you are interviewing for a job, interview the company as well. They don't do it, right? And they start realizing company culture, the environment after starting working for that company. But the interview process is a moment for the two parties involved to get to know each other. How do they develop people? What are the main pillars of the company? How does the employees live and breathe the culture? Because sometimes we just have the cultural pillars and nobody actually walk the talk. So This is your moment, understanding the culture of the company and what makes more sense or what better connects with your values.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important for anybody, whether you're searching for a job in the United States or abroad. It's so important to resonate with the company culture, because in the end, if your values don't match the values of the company that you're working for, your satisfaction, both within your job and your personal life, you spend so many hours per week, per month at your job, your quality of life can go down. Not to be dramatic, but if you don't resonate with the culture of the company that you're working with, that's a huge deal.
Absolutely, because imagine, first of all, you have invested some time and resources to get that job. And then you not only have to change jobs, but most likely you're going to have to wait a little bit to avoid being seen as a job hopper.
Yep, exactly.
So it's truly important.
It is. So when someone's moving into a new market, how can they figure out which parts of their experience needs to be reframed, and what's the best way to do that so that it resonates locally?
Yeah, absolutely. What I like most is what you do with the knowledge that you have. Okay. So for example, Mary, you and I could have attended the same college, but because of our different background and because of what we are going to do next, how we are going to use that information or that knowledge, you look different. As I was saying in the beginning of this podcast, I graduated in economics. For 10 years of my life, I worked for finance. I still have my financial veins that I use in customer experience. So my background, I did not start as a frontliner like many people in CX did. I started in finance. So what I bring to the table is just different. So leverage your experiences more than your credentials. Why do you do what you do? If you are a manager, how do you develop people? Why do people like or not like working with you? So these will tell more. And I love, the other thing I would suggest that I love is the profile testing. Mm-hmm. So there are some out there. I love it because speaking of mistakes, right? People think that what they have, what they do know more, everybody else does. So for example, if I like writing, if for me, writing is one of my competencies. I tend to think that writing is the same for everybody else, and it's not. And I'm saying writing because I'm not a good writer. I like talking. Give me the mic and
right, you go. Go girl. Yeah.
Or give me
I'm the opposite. Give me a piece of paper and I'll write forever.
Really? You see?
For sure.
So again, those are the things more than the credentials is what brings you joy in these timings that we are living of social media, of people saying out loud what they expect of women in corporate, of parents in corporate, you name it, right? We tend to kind of move away from our true self and our authenticity in order to fit in those boxes. And that's when we start kind of losing ourselves. Because whenever we try to fit in a kind of in a tight pant, at the end of the day, we're going to be exhausted. Whereas if we are wearing the clothes, the right clothes for us, how are we going to feel?
Yeah.
Good.
Way better.
Way better. Whenever, regardless if you are changing jobs, if you are moving internationally, whatever it is, go back to your true self, to what brings you joy, to what you would do even for free. And then I can tell you, there is a way to monetize this.
Agree. So what cultural or professional norms do you think job seekers need to unlearn when they're switching countries?
Learn.
Like let's say we're going from the United States to Brazil and we're trying to get a job in Brazil. What types of cultural norms should we unlearn from going from here to there?
Yeah. I believe is if you decide to move internationally, live your next destination culture. Because again, in my first international assignment, for quite some time, I lived as if I were in Brazil by being in Colombia. And it creates so many challenges for me because I couldn't connect with the local culture. I was the one that was different. So I'm not saying that you need to please people all day long. No, but why have you decided to move internationally? First of all, one of the things that you're gonna get by living internationally is learning a different culture. But if you keep living as if you were in your home country, you are limiting your experience, right? So that's the main advice I can give people who decides to live internationally is allowing themselves to truly connect with the local culture, hang around with locals. So, for example, if I go in Chicago, the best way for me to get to know the city is not to go into downtown. It's to go to the surroundings. Mm-hmm. It's to connect with the local people. What do they do during the weekends? What are the traditions? Let me give you a real kind of example between Brazil and the US. Here in the US, I think the most festive period is Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. That we don't even celebrate in Brazil. Right? So Brazil is more kind of a Christmas. So if I go to Brazil, or maybe let me give an extreme example. Brazil is Carnival. And so if I go to Brazil and I do not allow myself to get to know about what Carnival means, why there are so many people on the streets celebrating, I am kind of holding myself back. Yeah. And I know recently, for example, we had this concert of Gaga in Brazil, right? So she gathered more than 2 million people in Copacabana Beach. Yes, and people were just saying, oh, would we be able to gather that many people in the US? Maybe not, because it's part of our culture of gather at the beach. Right? So again, allowing ourselves to really dive into the new culture is the best advice I can give you. Yeah. Because none of this will be taught in an MBA. None of this. There are two things that MBA, in my mind, right? So two things that MBA will never teach you. One is corporate politics. And I can speak from a kind of a women standpoint. Yep. What do we have to face in corporate? The things that we have to deal with. I have never ever seen this being discussed or taught in any classroom. Yeah. And then the second thing is cultural differences. Because only by experiencing it, having a different baseline is how you're going to understand what kind of a cultural differences mean, being inclusive, being actable. Yeah. And for this, you need to live it. So living abroad to me is an MBA. The things that I learned by living in so many countries in such a short period of time definitely shaped my leadership. I listen a lot more, even though I like talking, I listen to a lot more. I try to pay attention to the details that if I've never have left Brazil, maybe I wouldn't even pay attention to those things. That's exactly what I said. So how do you listen to what is not said? How do you read what's not written? And how do you feel what is not expressed? You need to be part of this culture. Otherwise, you're not going to develop those skills. It's not by hanging with your home country fellows that you're going to develop this.
Yeah. I'm curious too, from a recruiter standpoint, when within all of these different regions, do recruiters tend to prioritize different things based on where they're at geographically?
Yes. What I have observed, Mary, depending on the department, for example, sales tends to be more, recruiters tend to focus more on local people. And why? You need to develop the market understanding. It takes time. Can this be developed by an immigrant? For sure, but it just takes time. In my area of expertise, which is client experience, having lived in so many countries actually add and kind of makes me an outstanding professional, because since organizations have been particularly multinational companies, they have been consolidating operations. Understanding how different cultures and people operate is a differentiator. But it's not the same for all areas of expertise.
Yeah.
Me, as a leader, hiring people, I can tell you, whenever I have the chance to hire an immigrant, of course, if this person qualifies for the role, I would prioritize an immigrant. And I'm going to tell you why. Because this person has faced so many challenges that a local will never face. And this helps you develop resilience, chaos management. So,
for sure.
Again, just for you to open a bank account. People come here and they think that it's the same like in Mexico, in Brazil. It's not.
It's much different.
It's right for you to get your driver license. I remember when I lived in Dublin, for me to get my driver license, it was 6 months of attending classes. Then once I get it, I would have to drive with a permanent driver for a year to get my driver license.
Wow.
Yeah. Whereas in Mexico, I just went to the equivalent of DMV, took a picture and got my driver license. Imagine a Mexican trying to get a driver license in Ireland.
That would be tough.
Whenever you move internationally, first of all, you are leaving behind your support system. You have to develop skills on how to pamper yourself because your support system is not there.
Yeah.
Second, you're going to have to figure out how that organization, how that culture, how that country works. From getting your ID to putting your kids in school. Language. You may not understand all the words, especially when people make jokes. I remember in the beginning, and still nowadays, I'm like, what? Right? So you laugh because everybody else is laughing, but
yeah, right.
Do not necessarily understand. This immigrant, they have to face so many challenges. And by going through this, they develop some skills that locals do not, just because of that international assignment. So of course, depending on the role, on the needs for that particular job, I would prioritize immigrant just because they have faced things that I know by my own experience they had to develop in order to live abroad.
So what's one piece of advice that we haven't talked about yet today that you would give somebody that is taking the first steps right now to start applying to positions outside of the United States?
We talked a lot.
We did. There's a lot of info already, isn't there?
But just thinking of the journey here, if you decide to leave the US, knowing the place, connecting with the community, understanding the culture, go visit that place, if possible, more than once. One thing that we haven't mentioned, weather. I can tell you. So in Brazil, we do not have extreme winter. And I'm from São Paulo, right? I remember that once I moved, first my experience in Dublin was because it's most of the year, it's gray, it rains, and the weather has a direct impact on your mood.
For sure.
More for others, again, it depends on how you are, but yes, definitely weather. And I remember once we moved to Chicago, we moved during summer. It was beginning of July. We landed in Chicago. It was warm. I was like, my gosh,
it's beautiful here.
The Brazil version here in the US, right? But then the winter came. And it lasted forever because in Chicago, for my standards, the winter lasts forever. Yep. 8 months of winter, of heavy winter. I do remember once going to a movie theater and just one block from where I used to live and my lashes frozen.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest too. I lived in Chicago. I grew up in Iowa. I feel ya.
You know, right?
I know it. Yeah, I feel it in my veins.
So yes, pay attention to the weather and how you deal with the weather. Not only you, because if you are moving by yourself, fine. But in my case, for example, In my second assignment, I moved with my husband, and my husband is way more sensitive to the weather than I am. So it was harder on him than on me.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Camila. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us, where can we find you on social media?
Sure, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Cami Ferreira with double A at the end, and many flags. The flags that I have on my name are the countries that I have lived. You can also find me on Instagram, Cami Ferreira.
Awesome. Thanks so much again, Camila.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I will be releasing episodes every Monday, so be sure to subscribe on the platform that you are watching this, give it a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time.